$3 million. That's the number that allegedly shook Quavo to the core. And according to explosive reports circulating across hip-hop blogs, the Internal Revenue Service just placed its hands on everything he owns. Mansion, cars, royalties, even the future money. If you thought you'd seen it all, think again, where secrets explode before your eyes. Because the internet woke up to a headline nobody expected, a federal tax lien worth nearly $3 million hanging over one of rap's biggest stars. The same man who once flexed private jets, diamond chains, and million-dollar tours is suddenly facing something far scarier than a rap beef. The government. And the reaction? People who claim they were in the room say it was devastating. Now ask yourself something real for a second. If you were in this position, same pressure, same headlines, the same threat of losing everything overnight, what would you do? Would you fight it? Would you disappear? Or would you finally expose the people who were supposed to protect your money? Because here's where the story gets even darker. The internet couldn't believe it, and honestly, you won't either. Rumors started flying within minutes. Bro said too much, and they got him. But was this really about unpaid taxes? Or was something much bigger happening behind the scenes? Let's break it all down. And trust me, it gets uglier. There was a time when everything around Quavo looked untouchable. Private jets. Diamond chains heavy enough to bend the neck. Luxury cars lined up outside Atlanta mansions like trophies from a war nobody else even understood. For years, Quavo wasn't just a rapper. He was part of a cultural movement. As one-third of Migos, alongside Offset and Takeoff, he helped create a sound that dominated an entire generation of hip-hop. Their flow became the blueprint. Their ad-libs became internet slang. Their songs turned into stadium anthems. Between 2017 and 2019, Migos were pulling in tour numbers most artists could only dream about. Reports estimated their live shows alone were generating tens of millions of dollars during the peak of the culture era. From the outside looking in, everything screamed success. But behind the diamonds and champagne, something wasn't right. And the first red flags appeared quietly. No explosions. No headlines. Just small whispers inside the business side of the music industry. Accountants asking strange questions. Lawyers sending emails that didn't get answers. And paperwork that started piling up. Because the truth about massive celebrity wealth is something fans rarely understand. The lifestyle you see on Instagram isn't always the lifestyle that exists on paper. A rapper can appear worth $40 million while having very little liquid cash actually sitting in a bank account. Most of the money is tied up in assets. Homes. Cars. Catalog royalties. Business investments. Tour contracts. On paper, everything looks massive. But taxes don't wait for paper wealth. They want real money. And that's where the story begins to take a darker turn. Around the early 2020s, Quavo and his group were already dealing with complicated business situations behind the scenes. One of the biggest involved a lawsuit filed against their own longtime attorney. The group accused the lawyer of conflicts of interest, alleging that business deals may have favored the label more than the artists themselves. The case created tension in the background of the Migos empire. Nothing explosive happened publicly at the time. But insiders in the music business started noticing something strange. The group that once moved like a perfectly synchronized machine was beginning to fracture. And then tragedy struck. On November 1, 2022, the hip-hop world froze when Takeoff was shot and killed outside a bowling alley in Houston. He was only 28 years old. The loss shattered the group. Fans around the world watched as Quavo mourned the death of his nephew and close collaborator. Suddenly, the music stopped. Touring stopped. The entire financial structure that had powered Migos for nearly a decade came crashing down overnight. When a rap group is operating at full power, the money flows from multiple directions. Albums, touring, merchandise, brand deals, festival bookings. But when the group disappears, all of that changes. Now the income depends on individual careers. Solo records, feature verses, occasional appearances. The difference in scale can be enormous. And while Quavo was grieving and stepping back from music, something else was quietly happening in the background. Numbers were adding up. Year after year. Taxes from 2021. Taxes from 2022. Taxes from 2023. Unpaid balances that slowly grew larger with penalties and interest stacking on top. By the time anyone outside the financial world noticed, the total had become enormous. Nearly $3 million. Then came the moment that turned a private financial problem into a public headline. In early 2026, the Internal Revenue Service filed a federal tax lien against Quavo. For people unfamiliar with how tax law works, the word lien sounds like a dramatic police raid. But the reality is even more serious. A federal tax lien is the government placing a legal claim on every asset a person owns. Homes, cars, bank accounts, royalty income, future earnings. Until the debt is paid, the government effectively stands first in line for any money connected to those assets. And the number attached to Quavo's lien was staggering. Over $2.9 million in unpaid federal income taxes. Once the filing became public record, the internet exploded. Hip-hop blogs began posting screenshots of the documents. Comment sections filled with speculation. Some fans were shocked. Others weren't surprised at all. One viral comment summed up the mood perfectly. Rich on Instagram, broke with the IRS. It was harsh, but it reflected a reality that many artists eventually face. Fame moves faster than financial management. Money starts coming in before the systems to manage it are fully built. And sometimes the people hired to handle the finances don't always handle them correctly. Within hours of the news breaking, analysts began looking deeper into Quavo's financial situation. On paper, reports estimated his net worth around $40 million. That number came from years of success with Migos, solo projects, brand partnerships, and a valuable share of the group's music catalog. But again, net worth isn't cash. The mansion in Alpharetta, Georgia was reportedly worth nearly $2 million. His car collection included luxury vehicles worth hundreds of thousands more. Rolls-Royce, Lamborghini, McLaren, Mercedes Maybach. Beautiful machines. But cars don't pay taxes. Selling them quickly isn't always easy either. The IRS doesn't care about aesthetics. They care about numbers. And suddenly Quavo was facing a very uncomfortable question. Was the money actually there to settle the bill? Or had the lifestyle moved faster than the financial reality behind it? Meanwhile, another contrast was quietly emerging inside the same circle. Months earlier, Offset had reportedly resolved his own tax situation with the government after paying off a separate IRS debt. Two artists from the same legendary group. Two very different outcomes. And the internet noticed. Memes started spreading across social media. Fans debating whether Quavo had been misled by financial advisors. Others blaming the collapse of Migos. Some simply pointing to the chaos that followed Takeoff's death. But inside the industry, a different conversation was happening. One that had nothing to do with memes. Because people who understand the music business know something important. Tax liens rarely appear out of nowhere. They usually mean something went wrong long before the headlines arrived. And if insiders were right, the real story behind Quavo's financial situation was only beginning to surface. But what came next? Even his enemies didn't expect. But what came next? Even his enemies didn't expect. Because once the federal tax lien against Quavo became public, the internet did what the internet always does. It started digging. Hip-hop blogs began reposting the documents. Financial commentators started breaking down the numbers. And suddenly a simple headline, Quavo owes nearly $3 million in taxes, turned into something much bigger. People wanted to know how it happened. Because to the average fan, the math made no sense. This was a man who had performed on the biggest stages in the world. A man who had platinum records, massive streaming numbers, and years of sold-out tours with Migos. So how does someone with that level of success suddenly end up with a government claim on their assets? The answer wasn't simple. But several clues started appearing once industry insiders began talking. First came the timeline. According to filings linked to the Internal Revenue Service, the tax debt wasn't a single missed payment. It was 3 consecutive years. Each year the balance grew larger. Penalties stacking. Interest accumulating. And the total quietly climbing until it crossed the $2.9 million mark. One commentator on a finance podcast summed it up bluntly. 3 years of unpaid taxes doesn't just happen overnight. Somebody wasn't watching the books. That statement triggered another wave of speculation, because fans started asking a very uncomfortable question. Who was actually managing Quavo's money? In the music industry, artists rarely handle everything themselves. There are accountants, business managers, lawyers, advisors, sometimes entire financial teams. And when those systems work correctly, taxes get handled long before problems reach the IRS stage. But when they don't, things can spiral fast. Some insiders pointed back to the earlier legal dispute involving the group's former attorney, a case where Quavo, Offset, and Takeoff had accused their own legal representation of conflicts of interest. The lawsuit had eventually been dropped, but it left behind a lingering question. Had the group's finances been handled properly during their peak years? No one could say for certain. But the timing made people curious, because the tax years now under scrutiny lined up with one of the most turbulent periods in Quavo's life. And that's when the story started to get even heavier. By 2021 and 2022, the cracks inside the Migos empire were already becoming visible. Tension between members had begun circulating across social media. Cryptic tweets, unfollowed accounts, rumors of disagreements over money splits. Nothing was officially confirmed, but the energy around the group had changed. Then November 2022 happened. The night Takeoff was killed in Houston. For Quavo, the loss was more than professional. Takeoff wasn't just a bandmate. He was family, a nephew, a brother in music since the earliest days of their careers. People close to the situation later described Quavo as completely devastated, and according to several interviews, he stepped away from music for a period of time afterward. Shows slowed down. Projects paused. The focus shifted from career momentum to grief. But while life slowed down emotionally, the financial world didn't pause. The IRS clock kept ticking. Taxes still had deadlines. Paperwork still needed signatures. Payments still needed to be made. And every month that passed without resolution pushed the balance higher. Meanwhile, another problem quietly appeared on the legal front. In 2024, a Las Vegas jury ordered Quavo to pay approximately $682,000 in damages related to a dispute with a hotel valet from a past incident. The courtroom testimony included surveillance footage. And although the case didn't destroy his career, it added another large financial obligation to an already complicated situation. Now imagine the pressure building behind the scenes. A federal tax lien approaching $3 million. A six-figure legal judgment from a civil case. Ongoing legal defense costs tied to separate copyright disputes over music and promotional content. And a career that had suddenly lost the massive touring engine of Migos. Because that's another piece of the puzzle many fans overlook. At their peak, Migos were earning enormous amounts from touring alone. Industry reports estimated tens of millions generated from the culture tour era. But after the group fractured and after Takeoff's death, that entire machine stopped. Solo careers continued, but the financial scale wasn't the same. One tour with Migos could generate income equivalent to multiple solo runs. Without that structure, revenue became less predictable, more dependent on individual bookings and features, more dependent on momentum. And momentum is something grief doesn't always allow. During interviews in the years following Takeoff's death, Quavo spoke openly about how difficult it was to even think about music at times. The creative spark wasn't there. The motivation wasn't the same. Which makes the timeline of the tax debt even more understandable. Because while the public saw a superstar lifestyle, the reality behind the scenes may have been far more complicated. Then came another wave of online discussion when fans started comparing Quavo's situation with Offset. Months earlier, reports had surfaced that Offset had settled his own IRS tax issue by paying off a separate debt. The contrast became instant fuel for social media. One comment that went viral read, "Two rappers from the same group. One paid the IRS. The other got the lien." Again, harsh. But that's how the internet talks. Memes spread quickly. Screenshots of Quavo's luxury cars circulated next to headlines about the tax lien. Critics mocked the situation. Supporters defended him. Some blamed poor financial management. Others blamed the chaos surrounding the collapse of Migos. But one thing became clear. The story was no longer just about taxes. It had become a symbol of something larger in the music industry. The dangerous gap between image and reality. Because for decades, rap culture has celebrated visible wealth. Cars, chains, mansions, private jets. But behind those symbols are complicated financial structures that can collapse if they aren't carefully managed. One industry analyst explained it this way. You can be worth $40 million and still not have $3 million in liquid cash sitting around. That statement alone changed the entire conversation. Because suddenly the narrative shifted. Maybe this wasn't about someone being broke. Maybe it was about the complicated financial web that surrounds celebrity success. And maybe the tax lien was simply the moment when that web became visible. But just when people thought they understood the situation, another layer of the story started to emerge. Because financial pressure can do strange things to people. It can expose hidden tensions. It can reopen old conflicts. And sometimes, it can force decisions that change everything. And in Quavo's case, the aftermath was only beginning. Because once the headlines hit the internet, the situation surrounding Quavo changed overnight. Before the tax lien story, most fans were focused on music. New releases. Possible reunions. Whether the legacy of Migos would ever return to its former glory. But suddenly the conversation shifted. Now the focus was money. Finances. Debt. Government claims. And the uncomfortable reality that even superstars can face financial pressure. For a few days, social media turned the situation into a spectacle. Blog posts popped up everywhere. Quavo facing $3 million IRS problem. Government places claim on rappers' assets. Is the Migos fortune falling apart? Some headlines exaggerated the situation. Others tried to explain it. But the effect was the same. The story spread fast. And with every repost, the narrative grew darker. People began analyzing every piece of Quavo's lifestyle. Photos of his mansion in Alpharetta. Videos showing his car collection. Clips from past interviews where he talked about money. Suddenly everything became evidence in a public investigation conducted by millions of internet detectives. One viral tweet said, "Imagine having millions and still fighting the IRS." Another one replied, "That's the difference between being rich and managing money." The conversation wasn't always fair, but it revealed something deeper about celebrity culture. Fans love the rise, but they are equally fascinated by the possibility of a fall. And for Quavo, that meant navigating a wave of speculation while dealing with the reality of the tax situation behind the scenes. Because here's something people rarely talk about. A federal tax lien is serious. But it isn't the end of the road. In fact, it's often the beginning of negotiations. The Internal Revenue Service doesn't necessarily want to seize everything someone owns. What they actually want is payment. And there are multiple ways that can happen. Payment plans. Settlements. Structured agreements. Industry experts often point out that many celebrities have faced similar situations. Actors. Athletes. Musicians. Even major business figures. The difference between disaster and recovery usually comes down to one thing: how quickly the problem gets addressed. And according to people familiar with the financial side of the entertainment industry, someone in Quavo's position still has multiple options. He has assets. He has income streams. He has a valuable music catalog connected to years of success with Migos. Every time a Migos song streams, money still flows. Every time an old hit gets played at a party or on the radio, royalties still move. That catalog alone represents a long-term financial engine. But the pressure of public attention adds another layer to the situation. Because when financial issues become headlines, they stop being private problems. They become public narratives. And narratives can affect reputation, booking opportunities, brand relationships, business deals. Which is why some observers believe the most important chapter of this story hasn't happened yet. The comeback. History shows that hip-hop is full of redemption arcs. Artists have faced lawsuits, bankruptcy scares, label disputes, tax problems, and still returned stronger. Because careers in music rarely move in straight lines. They move in cycles. Highs, lows, reinventions. Moments where adversity becomes part of the story itself. For Quavo, the coming years could determine which direction this chapter goes. Does the tax situation get resolved quietly through negotiations? Does new music reignite his solo career? Does the bond between him and Offset eventually lead to a reunion that brings new life to the Migos legacy? Or does the pressure of everything that happened after the loss of Takeoff permanently change the direction of his career? Right now, nobody outside his inner circle truly knows. But one thing is clear. The story isn't as simple as rapper goes broke. It's a complicated intersection of grief, business, fame, and the brutal reality of financial systems that don't slow down for anyone. Not even superstars. And perhaps the most important lesson hiding inside this entire situation is something fans rarely consider. Success creates responsibility. The bigger the career becomes, the more complicated the money becomes. Managers, lawyers, accountants, contracts, taxes. All of it has to move perfectly in sync. Because if one piece of that system breaks, the consequences can show up years later. Sometimes in the form of a headline nobody wants to see. Right now, the public record shows a federal tax lien tied to nearly $3 million. That's the reality. But the future of the story is still unwritten. Quavo still has influence. He still has a fan base. And he still has the music that helped define an era of hip-hop. Whether this moment becomes a temporary setback or the beginning of a larger comeback will depend on the decisions that happen behind closed doors in the months ahead. Because in the world of fame and fortune, the rise is never the whole story. Sometimes the real test begins after everything seems to fall apart. And sometimes, the most surprising comeback starts exactly where people think the story is over. So now we have to ask the real question. What do you think is actually happening here? Is this just a temporary financial situation that will get resolved behind the scenes? Or is this a warning sign about how complicated celebrity money can become when fame, business deals, and personal tragedy collide? Do you think Quavo will bounce back stronger than ever? Or has the collapse of Migos changed the direction of his career permanently? Some fans believe this is just another chapter in a long story that isn't finished yet. Others believe the pressure of everything that happened after the loss of Takeoff created challenges that few artists could handle. But that's exactly why conversations like this matter. Because the music industry often shows us the highlights, but rarely the reality behind the scenes. Now we want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think this situation will end quietly with a payment plan? Or do you think there's still more to this story that hasn't been revealed yet? And if you enjoy deep dives into the real stories behind celebrity headlines, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Because trust us, this story might not be over. And if new details emerge, you'll definitely want to be here when they do.